First, I want to thank just the entire Carmel PF team. Aside from just like learning more about debate and like honing in my skills with debate in school and so much more, debate has ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just helped me build like my closest friendships and relationships. And I really appreciate it. And specifically, my event heads have really helped like PF as an event become a true family, and I really appreciate it every day. So, my name is Emma Kim, and I'm speaking first for Psy Negation. And if all my judges and opponents are ready, my time will begin on the first word.
China is the only hope for a future in which our world can continue to stand as a livable and breathable home to billions of people. The PRC has not only served as the backbone to our world supply of critical resources, but they are also our best shot at preventing regional instability in resource-rich states. It is for these reasons that Chelsea and I stand in firm negation of today's resolution. Our first contention is the emission crisis. Kahaan 25 finds that in the status quo, China mines over 60% of rare earths worldwide, processing over 80%. These rare earth minerals are used crucially for developing green energy, and China is currently dedicated to goals to undergo a full green energy transition. U25 notes that for achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, China is already surpassing the required rate of installation, while the rest of the world is moving too slow. In fact, China can already produce enough renewable products for the world's energy transition as it stands. This is vital because renewable energy will be the component that contributes to our survival. Kahaan 25 notes that increments in the renewable energy sector reduce global CO2 emissions over the long term. These emissions aren't just something we can disregard, because new research from Harvard found that burning fossil fuels was responsible for 1 in 5 deaths worldwide, and quantifying health consequences of fossil fuel combustion should send a clear message to policymakers of the benefits of transitioning to alternative energy sources. Given that China stands as the global leader in REM extraction, accounting for over half, it is undeniable that China stands as the only actor that can bring the Earth out of the depths of global warming, and affirming will only reduce any chances China has at saving our planet from disaster. But these impacts extend even to the local level. China locks developing countries into green-intensive energy infrastructure, providing power that is not only clean, but accessible to millions. Jibao 25 contends that Chinese solar complex in Morocco provided clean energy for over 1 million households. In South Africa, a wind farm supplied clean electricity for 300,000 households, and a hydropower plant in Uganda saved over 1 million tons of coal, reducing CO2 by 3.5 million tons, the equivalent of planting 1.5 million trees. Our second contention is security vacuums. If China reduced their international extraction, it would provide opportunities for local illegal groups to fill in and incite greater harms. The National Library of Medicine found that abandoned mine sites have become hotspots for illegal artisanal miners, and Green 25 would add that already hundreds of miners illegally operate within abandoned mines. One specific example of this was in Ecuador. Austin 25 explains that since 2018, when Ecuador expelled a Chinese mine company, the poverty rate of 28% spiked to over 43% in rural areas. Others saw their livelihoods disappear with the loss of mining. Gunmen looted the abandoned mine, incidents ended in bloodshed, and authorities attribute this violence to criminal groups dedicated to illegal mining. However, a legal representative for the locals argued the only way to stop illegal mining is to let Chinese companies back in. China has uniquely provided stability for fragile regions, and when they leave, it leaves communities in the hands of worse actors, and the impacts are extensive. First, crime. Costella specifies illegal artisanal operations work in collusion with criminal gangs. As the ISSDA furthers, criminal groups controlling the mines set arbitrary rules extending beyond the mines, contributing to shootings, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking. Second, illegal mining is also associated with higher rates of child labor. As IED 13 proves, artisanal mining is associated with the worst forms of child labor, widespread hazards that risk death, and this apparent lack of regulation is because they're informal, operating outside of safety legislation. There's an absence of actual experts, and apart from workers in government-owned mines, there is no health screening of small-scale miners. In regions where regional conflict and corrupt governments are already rampant, China offers hope for countries' development and ordinance. Judges, affirming would prove to be a disaster. Not only would you see local communities becoming victims to the highest levels of exploitation, subject to violent gangs, trafficking, and deadly working conditions, but you would see the removal of infrastructure that actually provides these people with energy in the first place and saves our planet from irreversible damage.
First of all, I extend a large thank you to the HSC Speech and Debate team, and especially our administrators and coach, Steve Gennon and Kim Bakel. They have been instrumental in allowing us to be at the point where we are. I would Also love to thank our PF pod, specifically Jonathan and Rahul, for allowing us to grow as debaters, and our World Schools teams and slew of debaters here watching us. And obviously, most importantly, my partner Cameron Henderson for enabling us both to be here. And with that, time will begin on my first word. My partner and I strongly affirm the resolution that states, resolve, the People's Republic of China should substantially reduce its international extraction of natural resources. Our burden today follows a utilitarian framework, improving that in an ideal world, if this resolution is implemented, there will be an international net positive. For definitions, according to the Mineral Resources Law of the People's Republic of China, this resolution refers to China as all Chinese organizations who extract resources, even privately owned ones, as the resources extracted are the property of the Chinese government, no matter who does the extraction. International extraction is defined as extraction that happens within another country's borders. Also important to today's debate is the idea of neo-colonies, which are, according to the European Overseas Empires Standard 2018, a country that is controlled indirectly by another state, typically through economic means. Our first contention is respecting national sovereignty. Subpoint A is extraction harms a nation's ability to conduct itself on the world stage. Statista 2020 indicates 72% of Angolan oil goes to China. Reporting from the South China Post, Niabaj 2025 shows that Angola has taken over $46 billion in loans from China since 2000. Angola consistently reiterates their support for the One China policy and the Forum of African and Chinese Cooperation. French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote that sovereignty cannot exist where dependency and debt exists. The Chinese mineral extraction creates a system where nations are dependent and indebted to China and therefore act for China's interests. Subpoint B is a country's natural resources belong to the people. The Swiss philosopher Aimé de Vital wrote in his landmark publication, The Law of Nations 1758, that a foreign power extracting resources without serving the nation's interests violates sovereignty. This is a principle recognized by the UN in Resolution 1803, passed in 1962, which established that nations have the fundamental right to control their natural wealth for national development. Chinese resource extraction directly contradicts fundamental philosophy on international relations and current principles, as these resources are not used primarily for the benefit for the host country. They are used for China. Our second contention is reducing extraction allows countries to access their own capital. Subpoint A is international extraction reinforces colonial systems. Through controlling a country's natural resources, China creates neo-colonies of the countries it extracts from. According to Brookings FOFAC 2019, because manufactured goods with increasing technological content account for much of global trade, the continued reliance on colonial-era extractivist development models has marginalized Africa in the global economic and trading environment. Nations involved in extraction lose access to the real profit of extraction. This profit now belongs to China, where it should belong to the host country. Just like in the colonial system, when the resources leave the nations of extraction, so does the money that would have come from processing them and selling them. Chinese foreign extraction takes money that would have been made by nations, stifling their economies and keeping them poor. Subpoint B is access to their own resources bolsters the economies of host countries. Burkina Faso began the process of nationalizing their country's mines, which were previously controlled by French firms. According to an article published this year by Huramunde, a Zimbabwe news outlet, in the last 4 years, Burkina Faso has made $18 billion, previously when they had only kept $1 billion. Now that the profits don't go to foreign interests, they've made 6 times the profits from their mines in the last 4 years. If China reduces its international extraction of resources, the nations that have had wealth and resources taken out of them will now have access to what is theirs. A country that can access its own wealth is one that can invest in its people, and this is what China is preventing, which is why we are in strong affirmation of today's resolution.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so you say that the profits should belong to the host countries and not China, but why should these host countries have the profits when it's literally Chinese-owned companies that are doing the extraction?
Again, with our second contention, subpoint B, we discussed Burkina Faso and how they are nationalizing their own mines. Once they were able to be free and rid of colonial influence from the French, they were able to increase their profits significantly which is crucial because that means that they can control these mines.
My question was, why should the profits belong to them, not whether or not they'll make more money?
This is simply because of the exploitative relationship that China has with the countries that it's extracting.
You're just saying that it's exploitative and that they'll make more money if they own it rather than China. My question is, why should they inherently own the profits when it's Chinese companies that are the ones doing the extraction?
Again, well, you can't just brush off the importance of the Chinese exploitative deals that are being made. Simply put, China debt traps several of these countries and leaves them in situations.
Would these countries be able to have access to their minerals without
If I could ask a question, though.
Sure.
So, why can't China just buy rare earth mineral resources from the countries that are extracting, like from African countries specifically? Why can't they buy them instead of having to own the mines?
Because those African countries simply don't have the infrastructure to actually mine these minerals that are in the earth, and China is the one who actually sets up the mines and takes the minerals out of the earth because these African countries just don't do that.
Well, if I could have a quick follow-up, then why was Burkina Faso able to do that?
So you keep talking about Burkina Faso, but first of all, this was about France, so I don't see how this is relevant.
If I could respond to that really quickly?
Sure.
So, again, there is a large correlation and almost the same type of situation when we talk about neo-colonialism versus colonialism.
So the difference is France actually colonized Africa, whereas China is just making deals with countries and making contracts to mine minerals in their regions. Can I have a question now?
Yes.
Okay. You say that affirming bolsters host countries' economies, but if the only reason that these countries actually have made wealth in the past is because of Chinese miners, what do you actually think is the impact of this if you affirm?
Again, there's also the idea of a unmonopolized global system. China, in your constructive, said has much control over rare earth minerals. However, this is not good for the global economy because there's so much concentration in just China
Okay,
itself.
so it's not good for the global economy, but would you not agree that it's good for like the environment?
No, I would disagree. I would actually say that local control is better for the climate.
So you think that these local governments can produce better renewable energy like infrastructure than China?
Yes, because there is
Okay,
real.
give me a name of one.
Yes, I will give you. It is Vietnam from the World Resources Institute 2021, a project led by the Women's Union in Da Nang, Vietnam, when they were able to nationalize.
And take over the green energy industry.
Well, the time has expired.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm starting to pull out my first word. We agree with their burden of utilitarianism. Quickly refer back to our case, we tell you that China is covering the whole world's renewable transition. This not only impacts the whole world, but it also falls under their weight. We also tell you that the environment will only get worse under our second contention, as artisanal miners are less regulated and they emit 40 times as much mercury, 5 times as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as state-owned miners. We can see that the masses are benefiting on our world. Now I'll start on my opponent's first contention, which is national sovereignty. One, take into account that they give us no solution. What is going to happen after China withdraws substantially from the region? We tell you that our solution, which is basically in their world, we're going to be letting illegal miners in. It's going to lead to more child labor. You have not heard a single proposal from them. Now, two, when we look at the actual contracts, they are not predatory. We have seen that Chinese loans are empirically twice as low as foreign creditors and institutional investors. Instead of claiming that there's a debt trap, they need to actually look into the contracts that are going on. But secondly, the reason why there are so many arguments about debt trapping and how African nations are in this unsustainable cycle of debt is because they haven't paid it off. The interest rate is as low as 3% compared to a whopping 6% for institutional investors. And the only reason why this narrative is proposed is because they can't pay it off. Now, go on to their argument how sovereignty means that when countries are in debt, that means they lose their sovereignty. However, they have not only lost, the Chinese presence in the region is only contributing to the independence of these nations. We can see that when China has increased their investment, countries became countries became more independent, not only that, but we tell you in case that over 1 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions were mitigated because of hydro plants in Uganda and Morocco. This has led to the powering of millions of homes. Now go on to their subpoint B about how the global South's natural resources belong to the people. Yes, we agree. And through Chinese presence, we can see that they're building roads, they're building infrastructure. We have seen people testifying that their incomes have increased 3- and 4-fold because of Chinese infrastructure in the region. They're only speeding up trade and speeding up the economy, incorporating these African economies into the global economy. Now they say that China cannot access capital. However, the capital is from loans. The reason why African countries have this abundance of capital is because they're taking loans. It is mutually beneficial. As the president of Zambia said, that debt was easily restructured, renegotiated. I don't know why they're pushing a narrative that China is so predatory when African countries are actively making deals in the status quo and governments are only being more involved. Now go to their subpoint B about the historical precedent in Burkina Faso. First, that is French neocolonialism. They have not given us a single China-specific example. However, when we look back to our case, we have seen that when mines were abandoned by China in the past, it only leads to more conflict. It led to gunmen looting these abandoned mines. It led to the deaths of hundreds of people. This violence only occurs when we affirm the resolution, because when we affirm, these mines open up, and who knows which actors will come in, because they are so close in proximity. We tell you that this is worse for the environment, it's worse for labor harms, it's worse for child labor. We can see this all perpetuate upon affirming, and for those reasons, we stand in proud negation today.
Okay. My time will begin on my first word. The negation told you that negating this resolution is the only hope for the future. We disagree because that's not what the evidence shows. On their first point about the environmental damage done by Chinese mines, we have seen that China's environmental impact helping the global environment. This is not true. China actually contributes to the environmental crisis. According to Atlantic Council 2026, China is the largest emitter of CO2 in the world. Additionally, according to Bloomberg 2026, Chinese coal output rose by 4.83 billion tons just last year. According to the negation's own sources, burning fossil fuels is responsible for 1/5 of global deaths. We tell you the only thing China has increased in the recent years is their burning of fossil fuels. According to the same source, Bloomberg 2026, this is the 33rd straight year of China increasing their coal output. China is a detriment to the global environment. This isn't the only example, however. According to Business and Human Rights Center 2025, China specifically targets low regulation areas for their mining, places like Myanmar. The mining activities that China participates in are too dirty, too environmentally unsafe to even do in China. They can't do them. They're not allowed to do it in the largest CO2 emitting country in the world. What are these mining practices? What do they look like? Well, according to TAN 2025, Chinese companies use illegal toxic chemicals in their mines, such as mercury and cyanide, that degrade the environment. This is the mining system that the negation is proposing, and they are proposing that we keep this environmental degradation and continue it, which we disagree with. Moving on to their second contention about security, vacuums, and national stability. This is not true either. They say that if China were to pull out, groups like militia groups and violent groups would come in and cause harm to the civilians. What we're seeing right now is that is happening due to China. According to Genocide Watch 2025, China funds M23, a rebel group in the Congo responsible for human rights violations all across the country. They fund M23 because it allows them to control the mines in M23 territory. This isn't the only example, however. Returning to Myanmar, according to Jamestown 2025, China funds violent militia groups in Myanmar because the militia groups control the mines and China perpetuates the cycle of violence. It's not just militia groups that contribute to the humanitarian crisis China is causing. It's also in their labor practices. According to Amnesty International 2016, children in Chinese-owned mines work sometimes up to 24-hour shifts. This is the world that the negation is proposing, a world of Chinese child labor. This isn't the only example, however. They said that China provides jobs, and they said testimonies have shown that China has increased the wages of the workers. They didn't offer any evidence of these testimonies, but we have evidence of the opposite. According to African Studies Quarterly 2016, Chinese companies pay some of the lowest wages in all of Africa. China is exploiting these nations. Moving on to the infrastructure being developed that they touched on. What good is infrastructure that does not function? According to International Crisis Group 2020, major highways in the DRC are crumbling, and China has left clinics unfinished that they were supposed to finish in their infrastructure deals. The negation asked, where are the predatory infrastructure deals? Where are the predatory deals? We're showing you them right now. China promises to build these clinics, these hospitals, these roads, and then they don't follow through. They leave empty promises and a nation filled with environmental degradation and destruction. Chinese-funded destruction caused by their extraction. This is the world that the negation is proposing, which is why we are proud to affirm today's resolution. Thank you. Yeah.
So basically you're saying that when China leaves a region, that like all these good things are going to happen, but how are we going to protect the supply chain and actual industry when the biggest supplier in the world is being substantially reduced?
Do not be fooled. These supply shocks that occur from reducing Chinese extraction do not exist at the level the negation wants you to believe they do. According to The Guardian 2010, China reduced their foreign extraction by 70%, causing the rare earth minerals crisis. It shot prices up 40%, and then what happened? They went right back down. Prices normalized within the year. The economic impacts that the negation is saying would occur do not show up.
Who is going to fill in for the place of China? That is my question. You talked about the 2010 supply shock. That is not that.
We can see that there are historical precedents, though not with China, because China is currently perpetuating the neo-colonialism. We have seen countries nationalize their mines, and we can also see that other countries, Western-backed firms, can come in and do better. According to African Studies Quarterly 2016, Chinese-owned mines in Zambia had workplace accidents 3 times a week. When those mines were owned by French firms, they were once a month.
Right, so we're talking about Chinese mines. I asked which mines are going to actually fill in for the place of Chinese mines. You keep talking about these harms that Chinese mines commit. That is not my question.
Quickly, these mines do not go away when China leaves the country. They're already dug. Now, I have a question for you. Why is China unable to build sustainable green infrastructure in the countries they're investing in? You pointed to solar panel developments. These are in China. Where is the green energy revolution for the people of the global south?
We told you specifically in 3 different countries that there has been over millions of homes provided with power. There's been a hydro plant. It's equivalent to planting millions of trees. We tell you these tangible impacts in the status quo. They're happening right now, and it's only increasing. So what do you mean it's only in China? Because China also exports solar panels, they export hydropower, they export EVs to countries like the United States, and that is why they are a global leader in green energy, and that won't happen.
What good is exporting batteries and EVs when to do that they have to destroy local environments? What good is exporting batteries and EVs when to continue the Chinese economy, they burn billions of tons of coal every year? That was my question. Why is it a net benefit?
Right.
We've
For
seen
the
it.
coal argument, you say that coal output has increased. However, can you answer the question, where is the coal actually being extracted?
The coal is being extracted within China and also other places. The purpose of bringing up the coal argument is to say that China is not a green country. This is not the country we should trust to lead the green revolution. Why are we trusting China to do it when they can't even put their own house in order?
But how do we mine rare earth minerals?
What do you mean, how do we mine them?
Right, do we not need infrastructure that emits carbon dioxide beforehand for the long-term benefit and the long-term sustainability?
Yes, oftentimes rare earth minerals are extracted with poor environmental, that's time, but may I finish my remark? We've seen through the World Resource Institute that when this control is within local hands, it is cleaner than in China's. Thank you.
I will begin on my first word.
It is because Chelsea and I agree that we should help the most amount of people under their util framework that we are still so proud to negate. Let's start on our own case. Our first contention, which is emissions, tells you that China is the global leader in the green energy industry, and we need to continue Chinese extraction to save 1 in 5 people globally. Their first response to this is that China is one of the largest emitters, and they have several new coal power plants that they are inputted. First, students say that Chem24 finds that over half the total coal extraction was domestic within China's own borders. Therefore, even if you affirm the resolution, this domestic coal extraction will not change, and And this is why reducing international extraction, which is actually where the rare earths and where the renewables are, would be detrimental. Then they concede in their own summary and across that domestic extraction is not feasible, which is why it is so imperative that we do not affirm so China can get access to these minerals to produce renewables internationally. Then they say that what good is exporting batteries and EVs if it harms the environment in the short term when we all literally sit here using computers that require chips, that require the minerals that China extracts. They are short-sighted when they say that China is the largest emitter because obviously you need to emit some amount of carbon to install the infrastructure in the first place, but if you actually look at the long term, you'll see more sustainable energy for the future. Then on our second contention, which is security vacuums, they first bring up this point that these illegal miners are due to China, and they bring up the point of M23. First of all, unfortunately, they misunderstand our entire argument. M23 is a rebel group that is specifically aims to get more territory, whereas we are talking about illegal miners solely just to get profit. Furthermore, they failed to mention Ecuador a single time in their rebuttal, which shows the direct link between Chinese mining companies reducing their presence and an increase in violence and illegal mining extraction, which commits far worse harms such as child labor and worse environmental standards than China. Then, on their case, they run under this. The first contention is not, how these countries are not sovereign. Threatens national sovereignty. Their first sub-point is how they cannot participate on the global stage. But I would first like to address the fact that the app brings many issues to this debate, but they don't actually offer any solvency. The only reason these host countries can participate on a global stage is because China gives them investments in extraction. The debt and dependency they claim is so bad for these nations is actually better than what we would see private creditors and Western nations give because it's half as much interest. Additionally, in the status quo, these nations are not ready to be fully independent. Tour 25 finds that many African countries have tried to develop their economy by adopting policies, but due to lack of capacity to support these strategies, it fell short, unfortunately. You can actually turn this argument and say that China promotes independence, and they power homes, and they give these countries the resources they need to be independent in the future, because right now, as it stands, they are not. And for all of these reasons, I urge you to vote no.
Throughout today's debate, there have been three major flashpoints that need to be addressed that we as the affirmation have specifically won. This is the economy, the environment, and human rights. First, let's discuss the economy. Reducing concentration of resource supply lowers global market risks. According to Meng 2025 from AP News, the world's sources of critical minerals are increasingly concentrated in most notably China, leaving the global economy vulnerable. Affirming allows for the diffusion of critical minerals and their trade globally so that China doesn't have as much leverage in manipulating global markets. Furthermore, in this framework, there are benefits of decolonization economics. According to the Sustainability Directory 2025, this involves developing a broader range of economic sectors, including manufacturing, technology, and services to reduce vulnerability to global commodity price fluctuations. Furthermore, when we talk about price fluctuations, if China were to decrease their extraction of rare earths, we have seen through our source from 2010 that China has a resource stockpile to fall back on. Reporting by The Guardian, Goldenberg 2010, China has over 37% of the world's rare earth reserves. On top of this, when they did initially cut their rare earth exports, the prices skyrocketed 40%. However, within the same year, they went back down to normal prices. This is why we clearly win the economy flashpoint. Next, let's go to the environment. There has been 33 straight years of coal increase use in China itself. This is from Bloomberg 2026. We can clearly see that China is not leading the green energy transition. In fact, they are worsening the state of the world by creating less green energy by using more fossil fuels. Furthermore, China seeks out mines in low regulation areas. According to the Business and Human Rights Center, Le Monde 2025, when China realized the environmental cost of rare earth mining, they went all the way to Myanmar that has very low environmental standards. Now, lastly, going to human rights, resource extraction funds violence. There's no other way around it. According to Genocide Watch 2025, again, M23 is being funded directly by China to keep control of these mines. This is a clear humanitarian downside to the negation. Furthermore, they fund and support child labor. Amnesty International 2016 says that companies like Hayu employ children who sometimes work 24-hour shifts to extract cobalt. Think of these children and think of the great human rights impact that China is having that is extremely negative, which is why we are so proud to affirm, and by the end of today's debate, we ask that you find in favor of a ballot for the affirmation. Thank you.
Yeah. So why would China not continue to fund M23 even in an affirmative world, given that you're just reducing the extraction and not actually China's funding the groups?
China funds these groups to control the extraction. There's an explicit link between China funding these groups so that these groups hold the mines down for China.
Since it's not Chinese companies doing the extraction, technically that's not Chinese extraction, it's just funded. So they can continue to fund these groups to extract.
It's Chinese investment in extraction.
Is investment the same as non-extraction?
Oftentimes Chinese workers, we can see, are imported into these locations. It's not the local people sometimes who are doing the extraction.
Is it funding the same thing as extraction?
Well, they go hand in hand in this situation. The funding to secure Chinese well, if I could finish my response. The funding that goes into Chinese extraction is being directed towards M23 to have control of these areas.
Now, I have a question for you. How come China isn't doing anything to clean up the toxic runoff from their mines in Zambia or from the chemical usage in their mines in Indonesia? How come they're not helping the environment?
First of all, we would say that the Zambia spill was not due to China. It was just it's not non-unique mistake. All infrastructure can leak. And also, after that happened, China compensated the workers for a year because they knew, and they publicly announced this because they knew it was like a mistake. It's not like China is hiding. They're purposely degrading the environment. Oil spills happen in the United States.
I have a follow-up question. You said that China provided a year's wage. What good is a year's wage to the workers in Chinese companies when evidence shows that China provides the lowest wages in Africa? What good is a year's wage?
The reason why we see these wages so low is because people in host countries employ these people. It's not uniquely China being the actor.
Can I clarify for a second? China pays the lowest wages in Africa. It's not anyone else.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
So you spent a lot of the front half of your summary talking about the global economy, but my question to you is, what do you think is more important, the global economy stability or 1 in 5 premature deaths globally?
Again, it is under our utilitarian framework that all things
are...
are...
1 in 5 deaths not utilitarian?
It is under our utilitarian framework which the environment, the economy, and human rights are all considered to create a net positive, which we do see in the affirmation world, so they are all considered in an interdisciplinary manner.
To add on to my partner, they say that 1 in 5 premature deaths are due to fossil fuel burning. We showed you the evidence that China is increasing their fossil fuel burning. They're not good for the environment.
You conceded my response in summary where I said that all of that was domestic, and so therefore neither of us can really argue on that because it's not topical to international extraction.
We did not concede that. You said that about half was domestic. That means about half is
The
not.
total world, the entire world's production of coal, half of it is located in China.
Which means that half of it is not. How can we trust China to guide the transition to a green world when they can't do it for themselves?
China is the leading actor, and the only, comparative to the US, is a net negative.
Judge, today the negation world is the one that benefits most people falling under their utilitarianism framework. There is one main question that has not even been answered yet in this round. It is, who is going to solve for these supply chain shocks when China, the biggest supplier, pulls out? They have not given you a single company, a single industry who can fill in for this. They said that there was a price increase for the REM industry. However, we have seen not a single country diversify their supply chains. They have no solvency. It's only going to be an abandonment of mines globally, and we see with abandoned mines, artisanal miners fill in, and they have conceded this point. This is what happens when you affirm artisanal mining only creates more CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. They have conceded our card that it is 5 times as bad for the environment. Now, second, go on to the main issue about debt trapping. They have conceded our 2 responses. The first is that interest rates are historically lower for Chinese loans. This is a 3.2 versus a 6.2% comparison. They have conceded this. Second, they also concede that the deals are mutually beneficial. It goes into infrastructure. roads, schools, hospitals. It goes into green energy. It goes to connecting the economies of China to those in the global south, interweaving them in our economy. Now, going on to our second point of clash, which is child labor. Our opponents concede that China is the one who imports their own laborers. And even if you don't buy that, who is employing these child laborers? It is not China, because we have seen upon affirming artisanal miners take over the region, child labor rates are uniquely correlated with an increase in artisanal mining. They have hired children as young as 6 to work in these mines. Thus, we are the only world with solvency. The only example they give is from France. It's not even China specific, and for those reasons, we are so proud to negate today.
Judges, when you cast your ballot today, we implore you to consider 2 key voter issues of today's debate. The first one is tangibility. Who has shown real tangible impacts? We've heard a lot of claims from the negation here today. What we haven't heard is a lot of sources or a lot of cards. We've seen a lack of substantiation on the testimonies about wages being higher under Chinese control. We've heard a lot of claims about these companies being greener for the environment. What we haven't seen is evidence. We've shown you real evidence of the detrimental impacts of Chinese extraction. We told you about how they target low regulation areas. We told you how because the areas are low regulation, they're allowed to get away with using illegal chemicals like mercury and cyanide to use their mines. And we told you the real economic impacts of negating the motion of the resolution do not exist. They're short term. They went away within a year. When we did this resolution before, when China decreased their foreign extraction by 70%, the impacts went away within the year. We have shown you real, tangible evidence. All the negation wants to offer is speculation. They speculate on the economy. They speculate on the environmental impacts. We have shown you the real environmental impacts. Moving on to the second voter issue is the human impact of today's debate. It is China who funds violence in militia groups to control territory. It is China who pays workers slave wages, some of the lowest wages in Africa. It is China who employs the child laborers working 24 hours a shift, working 24-hour shifts. And it is China who builds crumbling infrastructure that debt traps these countries. They said that there are mutually beneficial deals for both countries. What good is a dam that doesn't work? What good is a road that isn't finished? And what good is a clinic that's left half constructed? We say that China is giving these countries a raw deal, and the human impact of the mining practices and the infrastructure development is a net negative under the negation. We have won this voter issue as well, which is why we ask you to cast your ballots for the affirmative. Thank you.